Hi guys, and you've got Versha Patel here again this evening for our Facebook Live on the Any Mum Can podcast. And so this is live and also published as a podcast later. I have a really good guest with me this evening. So pleased to have Margaret Bell with me. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's okay, and I'm very pleased you accepted my invitation. This is Margaret, and she's here to talk about intuitive eating. And if you've never heard of this, Margaret is going to explain everything. She will go through the benefits of it, what it is, and what's involved. So, but let me just give you a short intro to Margaret, because it's really important, actually, you understand where she's coming from when she talks about the things she will today. So she starts with being supposedly a chubby teen to a 40-year-old spiraling out of control person. So Margaret is now an intuitive eating coach who can honestly say she has walked the walk with emotional eating and body hate for over 25 years. Now that's a long time. And she had a nickname, Sunderthighs, was her nickname at school, and that's when emotional eating really kind of started for her. And then through to the death of her father in her 20s, to divorce and depression in her 40s. So it doesn't sound like the most joyful of journeys, but it's taking you to the work you're doing, I'm assuming now. So
Absolutely.
Margaret, thank you for joining us, and tell us more about what your line of work really involves. So intuitive eating, explain that, because a lot of people won't even know what intuitive eating is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, intuitive eating, we're all born with the skills, to be quite honest with you, of intuitive eating. As babies, we cry when we're hungry and stop when we're full. But through different reasons, normally it's through the likes of our parents who get us into the likes of habits for eating at certain times, finishing what's on our plate, and then actually rewarding us finishing our plate with a dessert. So from an early age, we're told that overeating is a good thing and you get rewards for it. Which, when you think of it, this goes back to generations and generations. And I've got no doubt that parents these days will be doing exactly the same thing. So, firstly, it's kind of unwinding all of that. And quite a lot of the time, as teenagers, as myself, we do get bullied at school, or we do follow peers, and we do follow even the likes of media. And that really sets off a number of things in our heads, that we're not good enough, we need to lose weight, and there's a quick and easy way to do it, which is basically go on a diet, which is something else that I go through with people in regards to intuitive eating, that a diet really isn't the way to go, because all a diet tells you is that some foods are good and some foods are bad. Well, at the end of the day, food is just food. Yes, it has different kind of calorie values, but you eat too much of anything, and it's not going to do you the best. So with intuitive eating, one, you learn exactly when you're actually physically hungry, because quite a lot of people who go through diets really do disconnect themselves with the mind and the body connection. So it all starts with really reconnecting that, learning what real physical hunger is, and then taking it steps further to understand really what food is best for you at certain times of the day. So really acting on your own intuition rather than depending on a diet.
Yeah, it's getting really in touch with the mind-body connection, like really, how does this food feel for me? And I think when you start out, that can be quite challenging because you're not used to doing that. You might not even know what you're looking for. How do you start that?
Well, as I say, the very, very first steps that I take with clients is asking a simple question. If you find yourself reaching for food, just ask, am I physically hungry? And that is quite a big step for a lot of people, because just having that moment to stop gets to actually reconnect your brain and to look into it deep into what you actually need rather than the food. So that is quite a big step to start off with. And then I take clients through a 5-day eating exercise where they eat good fats, carbs, and protein different times of the day. So they then learn what foods are best for them at certain times that give them the energy that they need to keep the blood sugar at a level and that keep them fuller longer. So that diet's no longer needed because they have their own knowledge, they have their own information that states that, okay, for example, I'm good for protein in the morning, or yeah, carb at lunchtime is the best thing for me. It's building up that own knowledge for their own selves rather than relying on outside sources.
And being independent, and it's empowering. And
Very.
everybody is so different. And how does it work? Like, so people feel different if they're eating carbs more, or how do they get then in tune with how that feels? Because some people find that tricky in itself, like getting quiet enough to really know what you're talking about. Okay, well, it's food. What am I supposed to feel? How do you get them to really connect with that?
Yeah. They basically keep a journal for those 5 days, asking themselves how they feel both emotionally and physically straight after food, an hour later, and then a few hours later. So that gauge really does tell you, okay, this food is going to give me the energy and the sustenance that I need to get me through the morning or the afternoon. And it really is, it sounds really simple, but yeah, that just then, after the 5 days, you can then look back at your results and see, yeah, I get that is good for me in the morning. And sometimes you'll find, because I combine, proteins, good fat, or carbs and good fat, so on and so forth, that combination is better. But the client have worked that out from the 5 days journaling.
Instead of somebody telling them.
Exactly.
Because then you actually discovered it for yourself. It's a realization as opposed to information being pushed at you. It's
exactly.
being, you found it
This
on
is
your own discovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very powerful because it sticks with you, Phil. You're more likely to live in that and keep in that pattern, in changing patterns, than somebody saying, well, actually, it's better to just eat clean food, or what is clean food, and what's the ratio, and what all these things.
Yeah.
Can you just explain? You said good fats. So just for the listeners, really, what would you infer from good fats?
The likes of olive oil, coconut oil, olives themselves, nuts, avocados, things like that.
Great, yeah. And yeah, absolutely, this powerhouse of not just fats, there's superfood, antioxidants, and all sorts in there. So it's really powerful. In terms of people realizing this, if they're asking themselves, okay, I'm reaching for, I really feel like having this muffin. I know I'm not hungry, but I just want it.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they make that analysis, that they've made this conclusion, are they being able to be powerful? Is it powerful enough to be able to stop them reaching for it, even if they know they're not hungry, but they're just like, you know what, I know I'm hungry, but I just want it. I just love the taste of it. And ingrained habits, if you go and have a coffee or a tea, or you're at a coffee house, you think it's almost like an automatic thing that goes with a hot drink. You have something else. Yeah. So how do you work around that when you're not hungry, but you still want it? The desire is incredibly stronger. It's like the mind is made up before the conscious mind can try and pull you away from that decision. How do you work with that?
I tell every client that that question will not work 100% of the time. Never will, because we're human. I myself ask the question, and now and again, yeah, I'll go for it. And that's perfectly fine, because you've asked that question. You've paused for that moment, so you've started that process already. But if you're going to have whatever you're going to have, eat it slowly, so you actually get the taste and the aromas, everything that goes with it, rather than, as quite a lot of people do, eat it really quickly, as if basically to forget that they've eaten it.
Yeah. And do you think some of that is, because you talked about emotional eating, is some of that related to then, because it can be unconscious eating, even if you've asked the question, and then you then go into an autopilot of how you eat, and whether that is an eating pattern to numb out something. It's quite complex.
It is very.
Never particularly straightforward. And so how do you work with that, with the emotions and the emotional eating and the numbing, and how even the relationship with our hormones of what's being released by eating the food, and how is that, the reward system? How does intuitive eating work with all of the dopamine being released and that drive, because it's a very, very strong driver to drive a behavior. How can intuitive eating work in that territory?
Well, as I say, we start with asking that question, and then a number of things along the way. For instance, I do get clients to do a body, mind and heart scan to really find out what is going through the head at the time, what they're feeling in the heart, in the likes of emotions, what the thoughts are, and what they're physically feeling as well. So by doing this kind of thing quite often, and I'm not saying everyone will do it every single time, but if you do it quite often, you really do get to learn what emotions and what feelings are behind these reasons that you're reaching for that food. And then we move on to the next step, which is basically, okay, I know this is the reason this is happening, the reason that I'm reaching for this certain food. So when I'm reaching for this, I can then do this. And that's really building up a toolbox for the client. So they know when this happens, they know what environment it happens in, why it happens, and then what they can do that will really nourish them in another way without eating the food.
Yeah, sounds a really good approach. And how long does this often take to be able to get people through?
I've got a client at the moment that, and this is this is familiar with quite a lot of my clients, are on session 1 and session 2. They do turn up. Well, we do get to tears, and that's just a lot of the emotion coming out. And that's basically because, one, quite a lot of the time, they don't feel heard. They've been struggling with this for such a long time on their own that it's not really heard. And she's now on week 8, completely turned around, absolutely glowing. Her confidence is up. So I normally work with people on around about a 10-week basis for the likes of emotional eating, and then we move on to other aspects as well.
Okay. And, obviously you've come to doing this work from your own personal journey. And so that's pretty much what's brought you to this work. Is there anything, did you uncover a great deal about yourself in your journey, in your 25-year journey?
Oh, yeah. A heck of a lot. I'd been on both sides of emotional eating, restrictive eating, and binge eating. So I knew, well, a lot of it was for me was not dealing with grief at the right time. I don't know whether there is a specific right time, but not dealing with the grief of my father's death for a number of years, and not really dealing with stress in the best possible way, kind of thinking, oh, it's just stress, and pushing it to one side, which then obviously, if you don't deal with stress the correct way, it can really lead to burnout, which it did for me.
Okay. And in your younger years when you were at school, how did that experience of being named in a certain way, did that feel, because you obviously feel it started somewhere like there, like,
Yeah.
what was that, what did that do to you?
It completely
Your
changed my
confidence?
character around, really. I was quite an outgoing person, and then once my mid to late teens happened, I went very introvert. I would say I'm a little mixture of both these days, but still very much an introvert kind of person. So yeah, that really did change my character. My mum, God rest her soul, would always say when I was a young child, you could hear me before you saw me, which changed quite dramatically once that bullying phase did actually happen.
And were you able to, in your teens, have help? Did you identify, did your parents, anybody identify that you were going through a tricky time?
My mum did notice, and yes, we did have talks. It was around about the kind of thing that snapped me out of it was actually my mum's health and her health story as well. About a year or so later, she was told that she had lupus, an
Yeah.
autoimmune disease. So that kind of snapped me out of it and got me into goodness knows how many years, 30 odd years of looking into the immune system and gut health. So everything now links together with what I do for clients.
Wow. Gosh. So you've done so you're a specialist in gut health,
Yeah.
and then you tie this understanding into intuitive eating. And
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind me asking, because I'm just intrigued myself. Never mind the listeners. But yeah,
Well,
because I'm fascinated by the gut and the gut-brain connection.
yeah.
But tell us what you key highlights that you found in your time.
Crikey, the key highlights that I found was obviously the likes of what leaky gut was, and what actually does cause it, which really did highlight for my mum what highlighted it for her, which was the likes of antibiotics and medication, which she was on quite a lot of at the time. And as well, the likes of sugar, which she was, quite a healthy person, but she did have a sweet tooth. And and just other things that I found out along the way. The likes of using a lot of antibacterial products, which I'm sure we've all done with the likes of COVID, but they can really, really affect your gut and your immune system, because they're taking away your actual immune, the things that actually fight. They're killing your immune system themselves. So I'm guessing quite a lot of people, after we've been in lockdown and everything else, have quite a low immune system at the moment.
Yeah. Well, less going outdoors and doing all those things that we're doing, and then combine that with the hand washing, antibacterials, and all those things. So this journey then started for you, what is this, something like 10, 20 years ago?
I was 15 going on 16, so I'm 46 now, so it's about 30.
Wow. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Because gut health, it was not even.
No. I just
and
started.
You found stuff. Like it was actually, wow. I'm so in awe. That a 16-year-old had that inclination to go and discover this. That's amazing. I'm so proud that that is an immense amount of time of studying and seeing the change. I mean, there's so much work now.
Yeah.
So tell us about leaky gut then, because that is a very important topic, because the whole fact that we create these antigens and then basically develop allergies.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more about that.
Well, your gut lining, as it were, is, I think it's around about the size of a tennis court or whatever, but it's only 1 cell thick. And within the likes of your gut, you have, your good bacteria and your bad bacteria. So I call the bad bacteria kind of like, well, your good bacteria bouncers, and your bad bacteria, the louts trying to get in without paying, as it were. And things can actually attach to these louts, as it were, the likes of different kind of foods, and it's only very, very small pieces, but even those kind of small pieces aren't supposed to get through your gut lining. But because of our diets, stress levels as well, our gut lining can be then more permeable, and these little things get through. And it's your antibodies on the other side which see these and then start fighting them. But then they start fighting everything. So your actual immunity is compromised, because quite a lot of the time of our lifestyles that we're leading, which leads to so many different things in the body. Your whole body is inflamed, so it can lead to leaky gut is known now to see the increase in the likes of autoimmune diseases. There's been a huge increase of them over 10, 20 years. Increase in diabetes, even through to the likes of cancer, can be down to the likes of a leaky gut.
That's really insightful. And I didn't realise, actually, relating it to cancer and the other things I'm aware of, but that's it brings people to brings that awareness even deeper, that everything that we're doing, living, our lifestyle, it's not just food, it's the whole, it's our wellness. How much priority and importance do we place on our wellness? Because we live in a productive world, right? We have about the to-do list and being uber productive, and how in touch are we with how we feel? And I do a lot of reading around neuroscience, and actually the article I was reading about stress is stress is not actually something that's created in the mind. It's a response to our heartbeat. So how is the heart, and how we are interpreting not stress, actually. Stress and feelings or emotions, should I say, are a direct kind of consequence of the interpretation of things that are going on in our body. So it's like your mind does a body scan of what's going on in your body, and then produces an emotion, which then can also trigger stress, or a way of feeling. You know, when you feel like, oh, I don't feel that good, got butterflies in my stomach, I'm nervous, and things like that. So all of it is so collectively,
so interlinked.
Yeah, we're such an intelligent system. So how do we go about then, with the leaky gut? So is that we can introduce fermented foods, testing those things, but does FODMAP come into this at all? Understanding dark shades and things like that.
It's different things for different people, to be quite honest with you, because a lot of it can be down to food sensitivity as well. I was actually doing some study just before we got on here that there was a gentleman who liked pecan nuts, but something in pecans actually triggered off his leaky gut.
Yeah.
So it can be different things for different people, but depending on what has caused your leaky gut, will then depend on what you can use to actually repair it. There's one thing that I do advocate, and if you're a vegetarian, I apologise, but it is bone broth, because the actual goodness that comes out the bones, the likes of collagen and things like that, repair that gut lining.
And you can actually buy it if you don't want to make it, because it takes a long
takes
time
24 hours.
I haven't seen it anywhere else, but I've seen it in Waitrose, it's like a bag, but I haven't seen it in any other places. But do you know anywhere else that sells it?
Yeah, there's actually UK
I'm sure there'll be online
website.
Sorry, online. Yeah,
there's
course.
Actually a bone broth UK bone broth company that just can ship it out to you.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, that's just amazing. Do you get the same effect with fish if you did a bone broth with fish bones? And there is a name for that. I've forgotten what it is.
I know what you mean. You can actually do that. The smell isn't exactly pleasant. You can. There is a vegetarian version that this company does do. I haven't looked into it myself, but they do a vegetarian version as well. And be really interested in how that specifically works. Because that, how on earth do you get the goodness from the vegetables the same to what you did for getting out of actual animal bones? So that's something I'm going to start looking into.
That is because I'm pescatarian, so that's why the fish, because I think it's not quite the same as when you use sheep and cow. I think even chicken is good, but I think the preference is more on the meat side than it is. But chicken does. I think I've seen people put the whole rack of the chicken, and you strip the chicken and then you just put the rack in. And I follow Sarah Wilson. I used to do a lot actually when she's the woman that I Quit Sugar book, and she does a lot on like no food waste. She collects every bit of food, and she does so many different things with it, and she gives lots of ideas in her recipe book about how you can repurpose food and use lots of things, and on her like social media. So it's really good, and you've been able to utilize lots and lots of things so that you're having as little impact on the environment. So but coming back to the gut, and then relating to intuitive eating, how would you explain how it interlinks?
Okay, so intuitive eating is all working on your gut instinct. So if your gut isn't healthy, if your gut is not functioning in the way that it should, how can your intuition be then in tune? So the two just marry together perfectly.
Yeah, and a lot of people might use that term, right? Gut intuition or gut feel, but they don't really maybe realize there's actually trueness to that phrase. That what's your gut feeling? You know, what does your gut tell you about this food that you're eating?
Because
we just use
is
it.
your second brain. It is. There's this huge connection between the two.
Yeah, and I'm so pleased you brought that. I've got a whole episode on another. Well, I've done one already on gut health, but I've got another one coming up with a just slightly different angle. But I'm so pleased you've touched on it, because that is so powerful to hear that and understand that. How can you even gain that kind of intuitive eating, intuitive feeling, and be in tune with your body if your gut is out of sync? So give us some symptoms so that people can think, okay, I don't know if my gut's out. You know, I'm not obese. I'm okay. I feel like I eat all right. So a lot of people do think I eat all right, until I then look at what they eat and I'm like, well, I'm not sure. But that's, it's everybody's got their own subjective view.
Yeah.
What would a person need to be looking out for if they've got an out of kind of balanced gut?
So, are you sleeping right? How many hours of sleep are you getting? Do you feel actually tired when you wake up? Do you have brain fog quite a lot? Do you get gas quite a lot? Are you bloated through the day? Do you have acid reflux quite often? Even down to, and this is getting really personal, what does your poo look like? Are you constipated?
Well, that's a really important one. That's a really important one, I think.
Are you constipated?
Constipated.
Are you getting diarrhea? Do you have IBS? So there's definitely 10 things you can really start looking at.
Fantastic. That's really good. And what would you want the listeners, if like one thing to take away from what we've spoken about today, what would you want them to take away?
Honestly, slow down. Stress is the biggest thing when it comes to the likes of gut health and when it comes to intuitive eating as well. If you're constantly living in the fast lane, then your health will definitely go downhill. So slow down.
Yeah. And sometimes people don't catch that until it's too late. And then they are dealing with a whole lot more. Yeah. And so it is really looking at actually what other people have been through and think, right, okay, well, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm going to catch myself now before it gets, because everybody thinks, right, it's not going to happen to me.
And then it does.
And then it does, because it can happen to anybody. So yeah. I'm really pleased you brought that message. And so thank you, Margaret. I really appreciate you coming and joining us this evening. Where can anybody find you if they want to get in touch with you?
My website, which is nehhub.com, which stands for Naturally Empowered Health. I do have a Facebook page group, which is called Emotional Eating Support UK. And they can catch me on LinkedIn as well. Just look for Margaret Bell.
Fantastic. And thank you. Thank you again for your time. I've got one last question, which is actually about you and not necessarily to do with your profession, as it were. What would you say your superpowers are?
Oh, heck.
If you have any.
Staying calm when everyone else around me is fraught is definitely a superpower.
Fantastic. And has that occurred often?
Lots, definitely lots. From the jobs I had beforehand to definitely now, people always say, "You're so calm. How do you manage it?" I just do.
And do you think that's something you've learned, or is it an innate thing?
It's definitely something I've learned, and I think through the likes of my coaching, that has basically definitely built it up.
That's great. That's fantastic to hear, because some people just have it naturally, right? But it's important to be able to convey to people that, you know, even if you're not born naturally like a certain way, that doesn't mean you can't evolve these skill sets or these traits. I'm kind of a hot-headed kind of person, reactive. Well, not now though, much less.
Yeah.
But it just shows that we can, if we want to develop a trait that works for us, it's all possible. And that's, again, that thing plays into that power of feeling empowered, that you can ask the question, like you said, am I hungry? That you can change patterns, you can change ways and habits and ingrained thinking and all of that. So it's great to hear that you've been able to do that. And I certainly know I've made a conscious choice, and that's it, it's choice.
Yeah.
Made a conscious choice about things. So great. Thank you, Margaret. And we've had some nice comments too that have said hello and thank you for the information. So Margaret, thank you for providing insight. And thanks guys for listening. Take care.